Relations between the police as well as the general public, and especially people of color, they seem to have gotten worse lately, but have they really, or is it just now we're finally having a very uncomfortable conversation? Now, here's the thing. When's the last time you actually sat down with somebody who worked the streets as a cop and tried to understand things from their perspective? When's the last time you ever had a conversation with one? And I'll be honest with you, I can't tell you when, so we're going to do it now, and we're going to spend a couple of moments walking in one of their shoes. David was a police officer in a major urban city here in Northern California. We're not going to give his last name. We're not going to tell the department because the way that police departments work is you got to be authorized to speak and so forth. But David is retired, but he spent 30 years all across the spectrum, so let's see what we can find out. Welcome. Good to have you, man.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so 30 years. So you said, you were telling me before we began to roll tape that you worked in all different capacities.
I worked in every single unit in the department, save one. And throughout 30 years, spent half my time in field operations or patrol, and the other half what they call inside, so investigations or administration.
Okay, tell me why you became a police officer.
You know, Brian, it's, I won't say it's serendipity, but it was, I'm not really sure. I went on a ride along with my father. My father was a police officer, but he was a police officer later in life. He was a musician, my mom's an artist, and my dad became a cop in his early 30s. And I went on a ride along. I was 18 or 19, ready to go off to college. Really wasn't keen on my declared or soon-to-be declared major. So we're driving around. He stopped somebody for speeding, I guess. And I'm looking at the knobs and the things on the patrol car, kind of not paying attention. And he gave the guy a ticket. And my dad got back in the car. And as he got back in the car, the motorist who was cited got out of his car and kind of charged back to the police car. My dad got out of the car, and I watched him. I thought, it's going to be a dust-up, it's going to be a fight, what? He starts shaking my dad's hand. And my dad talks to him for a few moments, and my dad gets back in the car, and I look at my dad and said, you gave the guy a ticket, right? He said, yeah. Why are you shaking your hand? I wouldn't shake your hand. I'd tell you to go pound salt or something. And he looked at me and said something like, you know, what do we teach you at home? Why don't you treat people like you want to be treated, right? And I don't know if it affected me or not. I kind of blew it off and said, right. But I started thinking about that. So in the year or so afterward, I started thinking about the job and listening to people as they talked about my dad, and they loved my dad. My dad was a great social person. He talked to people. And so I started paying attention to the cop work, and not so much about what I saw in the movies like Dirty Harry, but seeing it from a different side, seeing it from like a guardian side. I thought, you know, this would be a pretty cool thing to try to do for a few years. Well, 30 years later, that's what happened. I really loved the job. I loved the job because it was a chance. It sounds kind of corny, maybe trite, but it's social work. It can be social work. And you can get to take care of the bad guys too. Key is you never know when it's going to be.
Yeah, how bad it's going to get. Okay, so it sounds to me like you really did become an officer because you wanted to protect and to serve, and same with your father from what you tell me. All right, so tell me then, from your perspective, why the view, especially between the African American people and people of color and the police, why it's taken such a sharp turn. In other words, you know, one of the things you'll hear is that white people, especially white people in suburban areas, look at police as there are friends, there are protectors. People of color, people not involved in, I'm not talking about people in criminal activity, but just people of color look at the police and they're a little more, you know, am I going to get jacked up? Am I going to get stopped for no reason? All right, so tell me, where's the disconnect?
Well, I think the disconnect, Brian, it's time out of mind in our society. We have a chasm between white and black, people of color and white. We always have, at least in my life. And we've kind of swept some things under the rug, but it permeates our society. And the police, I think, are just emblematic. The police are the first people you call. They're the front lines of government. They deal with crap 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so they're emblematic of society's problems, I believe. So I don't think it's any worse. I think with certain high-profile incidents, and incidents being captured on film.
And video's a big part of it.
Big thing. It's brought some things to the fore. Not necessarily a true representation, in my view, of all cops. I mean, God, there's hundreds of thousands of police officers, millions of contacts and things that happen every day. Not everyone results in a shooting.
Of course not.
But when it does happen to a person of color, I think it's like a magnet, and it will focus people's attention on potential problems. Look, I think that the problems are, yeah, with the police, in part, with society, definitely. But there are systemic issues that should be treated.
Such as?
Education. You know,
Education on whose part? Are you talking about education of police or education of the general public?
Oh, both. Both. Understanding walking a mile in another person's shoes. But also, when I say education, I mean some systemic issues of parity between whites and others.
Well, let's go here a little bit and get a little bit more to the meat of what a lot of the disagreements are. You know, you and I were talking before we started, and I guess you've been following me for a long time. And there are a lot of African American men my age and younger who there's not one you're going to find who doesn't have a story of walking down the street and getting jacked up, or, you know, I got a story of being, you know, when I was, 22, 23 years old, being driven in a car by a white a girl who was a friend of mine. Police pull us over to make sure she's okay. We've all got those kinds of stories. So if it's about education, then, you know, tell me why we all have these stories.
Well, it's education in part. It's also how we tend to look at people of color, particularly young black males.
Okay, when you say we, okay, you're talking about police?
I'm talking about police,
okay.
and I can't speak for all
of course
policing.
not.
But there's this thing, I believe, that we've kind of worked through this explicit bias that, oh no, I'm not a racist. I hold everyone equal. But there's something that operates within all of us, black and white. It's called implicit bias. And I don't think we in law enforcement, or we anywhere, but law enforcement is so visible, have really understood that or worked through that implicit bias, what it means for us. So education, it means, to me in part, that we as police officers form better communication and connections, wholesome connections with others, okay? Not just within our own ranks, which we tend to do.
Well, and it's not just police. We all live in our bubbles. We learned that with this election, that we all live in our own individual bubbles, and we rarely, it's the whole point of this series we're doing, we rarely talk to people outside of our own bubble, people with different experiences and so forth.
Because it's not comfortable.
Yes, it is.
It's not comfortable. If you want to hang out with people that kind of validate yourself, right? Because that's comfortable. What's less comforting is when you go out and stretch yourself a little bit. So education with officers, like anyone, is to find others, kind of an out group, and find the good in all of them. And it sounds like it's Pollyannish, but it's not. And we've got no choice, right? We really have no choice. Most officers deal with, and I'm sure you can imagine this if you don't know, the hell of life every day.
Oh, sure.
We never know what's going to happen. But what I think happens over time is, for some officers, if you don't keep a perspective, looking at other people as human, you tend to put up a guard. You tend to put up a callus. You develop a callus, right? And a callus, what does that do? A callus protects you from harm.
Right.
And I think that's what happens a lot in law enforcement.
But also from feeling. A callus can do that. Can do that as well, and protect you from empathy if it's a callus in it. And again, we all have them. Yes. Let's talk a minute about what seems to be one of the most common problems in terms of relations, especially with black men and with the police. You know, we all have. If you have if you're African American and you have a son, we have to have the talk. You have to have the talk with them about what to do when you get stopped because you're afraid of of them getting jacked up or shot or hurt because the tail light was up. Walk me through a traffic stop. I'm driving down the street, and you pull me over. I don't know why I'm pulled over. You pull me over. Take it from the moment that you're in the car, the lights have gone on, I've pulled over. What's going through your mind?
So the first thing is my safety and the safety of people around. So I don't know who I'm stopping, right? There's some allegation of some traffic violation you've done, all right?
Okay.
So I don't know who you are. I'm cautious. I walk up to the car in a way that doesn't expose myself to too much danger, but the bottom line is I've got to walk up and contact you, the driver. I'm going to explain why I stopped you. Now, as a rookie, I asked for your driver's license and registration right off the bat. And I would often get, well, why are you stopping me? And I would go back and forth. Please let me see your driver's license. So it's easier just to explain because people want to know. So here's why I stopped you. You went through the red light back there. I did not, or whatever. Okay, I'm going to explain that to you in a minute. Can I see your driver's license and registration, please? And then we'll have a dialogue. The most important thing is I'll listen to you. I'll take a few moments and listen to you. Then I'll explain what I'm going to do, either write you a citation or give you a warning. If I'm going to write you a citation, my practice was I'd be very businesslike, but short. Go back to my car, write the citation, present it, and hopefully in a professional way, explain the process to you, and explain your rights. You know, you have a right to make this appearance, plead not guilty. Then we'll have a trial, and the judge or commissioner will make a decision.
Okay, now see, this is you, and this is not, you know, I've had traffic stops where the officer has dealt with me exactly as you know, and everything's fine. Oh, okay, I didn't know that I ran through that light, or I didn't know I was going 5 miles over the limit, or whatever it is, and it's fine. But then there have been others where they did not behave in the way that you described.
The officers didn't.
The officers didn't.
And that bothered you quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
And it amped things up, right? So what you learn, or should learn fairly early on, if you don't come to the job with it, is listening, just patience. You know, I worked with officers who would be a little bit more forward, a little bit more aggressive. Abrasive, because they wanted to explain to me, they just want to get through this. And if most of the time, it would just prolong the contact, because it would just aggravate people. And so what I try to do, and I had bad days, or bad context, but what I try to do is just take a deep breath if I find myself getting upset, and listen. And then I would explain. Maybe listen some more, and then explain some more. 9 times out of 10, that would work. And so I came to the job, and most of the people I worked with had the same ethos, the way of working with people, is just listen. When you go to a disturbance, the most successful cops I knew didn't come in with their batons or guns out, or they came in quiet, because it would bring the tension level down. It's very easy to jack things up. It's very difficult, once you jack things up, to bring it back down. And
yeah, because adrenaline's going, and emotions are high, and everything else.
And the cop's attitude generates that, either way.
Now let's go back to the traffic stop for a minute, and let's talk about things that motorists do that help to make it a more difficult situation. Okay, so again, let's go back to the situation where you've pulled me over, I've stopped. Okay, where do you want my hands? You want my hands on the wheel? What should I be doing?
I would like to see your hands on the wheel. One, because you're not going to kill me with your eyes or your mouth or your shoulders or your leg. Something's going to happen. It's going to be you holding something or grabbing something. Okay. So your hands.
Okay, now, my hands are on the wheel. Yes to my license and registration. It's in my back pocket. Okay, well, so how should I get this?
Well, if you were saying, it's in my back pocket, officer, can I get it? I said, sure, go ahead.
So I need to tell you.
That would be optimum, sure.
Okay.
Optimum.
Registration is in the glove box. Now, again, I can understand there could be a gun in the glove box. So again, how am I doing this?
Officer, hey, can I see that? Can I get my registrations in the glove box? I'd say go ahead.
Okay, so make sure that you say that the etiquette then is to tell the officer what you're doing and just go grabbing for stuff.
Yeah, put yourself in the officer's position.
Oh, I can understand.
And if you're being very helpful, perhaps, but you're grabbing stuff, you're reaching under seats, you're looking in visors, the cop doesn't see your hands. He or she doesn't know what's going on. For the sake of comity between both parties, just, hey, I'm going to do this. Can I do this, officer? And it's not saying you have to demean or you're acquiescing. You're just saying, look, I want to do this. I want to drive away. I know you want to drive away. After you do whatever you're going to do, officer, I'll announce what I'm going to do. That's fine. That's great. That's a great idea. And then the officer, hopefully, has checked her or his baggage at the car door and is not upset over the fact you almost hit a kid maybe, or you're putting makeup on and went through a red light and almost collided with someone. Again, cops are going to react to what they see. Me, you have to almost run me over for me to stop you and give you a ticket. But I stopped people in my 30 years as a cop. And I always tried to check my emotions, because when I didn't, that's when the problems started. That's when, what's your problem, officer? What? And then I stopped and I said, okay, took a deep breath, you know, and put things in perspective.
Okay, in terms of the etiquette, you know, from the way that you told me that you conducted yourself as an officer, I don't think it mattered. But the question I'm going to ask, I'm going to just ask you in general in terms of your work with officers over 30 years. is the etiquette the same if you pull me over and I'm a white man? Are you going to be as uncomfortable with me, you know, reaching under the seat or something, or reaching for my wallet back here, or reaching for the glove box? You know, if I'm a white man with blonde hair and blue eyes, do I need to explain to you what it is that I'm doing before I do it, or are you just going to make the, and I don't mean you.
Yeah, no, I understand.
But
yes.
Is the assumption just going to be made that if I'm grabbing for the glove box, I'm going in there to get my registration, whereas if I'm a person of color, I might be pulling a gun out of it?
My view, and I think the view of the officers I work certainly is, it's equal across the board. It's de rigueur. Tactically, we want to see any motorist's hands, be they brown, yellow, black, white. It doesn't matter. Those hands can operate a gun to kill us, not to be melodramatic, just as anyone else's can. So it doesn't matter to me. Now, is there something that comes up within us, some officers, that invokes that implicit bias?
Yeah.
Maybe so, maybe so. I grew up in Oakland. I had dust-ups as a young man, as a teenager. Did that impact me as I grew older? Yeah. But I try to check that. I try to acknowledge it. Not 100% perfect.
None of us are.
Most officers aren't either. But I think it doesn't matter with the race. It really doesn't. Now, when you speak of race, there is a tendency for some young men to be a little bit more bellicose, a little bit more mouthy. It's white, it's black, it's Hispanic, it doesn't matter. When that happens, I think the officers tend to get defensive more. And if they don't take a moment and recognize that, again, those words aren't going to kill you, the hands are, they can get in some trouble. But I think that if the officer, and the reason I bring that up, if the officer has a bias against young black males, or young males of any other than white, or even young white males, then I think that could play out, that could show. And then the officers and the citizen can be yelling back and forth and amping it up.
It goes from here to here to here, and then something bad happens.
Something bad can happen. But it's the officer's job to, wherever possible, de-escalate that. That's what we're getting paid for. It's easier said than done sometimes. And if you're around that negativity 7 days a week, or 4 days a week, or however many days you work, then you have to really steel yourself from the urge of lashing out, because it gets old. It gets old being yelled at, being cursed, being flipped off. But it's part of the job too. I mean, it's easy to say, but sometimes it's difficult to actually play out in real time.
You know, I guess because we're just about out of time, but I guess what my takeaway from this conversation with you is that the public and people of color need to see police officers as being human beings, and police officers need to see the public and people of color as being human beings as well, and talk to each other.
And talk.
Is that what you, because that's my takeaway from our conversation.
And that's a great takeaway, and not talk at each other, but talk with each other, have a dialogue, have a discussion. For the officers and the citizen, take a few extra moments to kind of crawl around in that person's skin for a bit. It doesn't have to have advanced degrees in psychology to do that. It's just common courtesy, right? And if the officer is invoking the vast power of the state to seize you for a moment, no matter what that's for, I think the officer has an obligation to explain and talk. And when the officer does that, when they can, everybody wins. Because I think they'll find, and I did in 30 years, the more time you spend with somebody, the better off everybody is. And that can be the murderer that I've arrested, or the jaywalker who I'm stopping to say, just don't do that in front of me. You know? The more time you spend with them, the more they understand, and the better off we all are.
All right. David, thanks for talking with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.